What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another 2023-2024 NBA look ahead. We are on to the team that inspired the thermonuclear AF tagline, the Utah Jazz. And that means I get to speak with my guy, Tony Jones of The Athletic. He covers the Utah Jazz and the entire NBA for them, does a fantastic job. This is year 3, Tony, if you're agreeing to come back on. And so I
Yes.
tell when you make a third appearance, it's your fault. Like the first 2, I might have tricked you, but now you know where you're getting into. So I appreciate you coming back, but it's also a little bit your fault because now you've agreed to it a third time. But I mega appreciate it.
Well, my thing is that what I'm saying, like I need reasons for people to listen to me. So, your show is one of the best out there. So, I figure if I come on your show, that's going to be all to the good for me.
Well, that means a lot coming from someone as talented as yourself. How are you doing this
I'm doing
offseason? Now
good.
that we're not the offseason anymore. I mean, did you have a good offseason? Is the way to put it.
I had a short off season, a lot shorter than normal. But I thought that once you got out of summer league, got a chance to spend some time with the family and do some of the things that actual normal people do, and I didn't have to chase around a Donovan Mitchell trade this year, so that was even better.
Oh yeah, that was absolute chaos last year.
Yeah, that was chaos.
I do remember though when we were recording last year, I was so low on what the Jazz were going to be. And so my first question to you, aside from admitting that I think a lot of people were wrong about them, how much, if at all, did like that first part of last year, where like, you lead into February 1st, top 5 offense, you're 1 game over 500. You even had some like higher end stretches before that. How much did that alter like the way the organization viewed their team or was going to treat this rebuild? And even if it's just a matter of they didn't expect Lauri to be this good, and that of course changes things to some degree.
It didn't. I don't think it altered it a lot because, and the reason why I said that is because they still went and did what they thought was best for the long term health of the organization, right? So, they could have kept Mike Conley. They could have kept Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt, 3 guys who were really helping the Jazz in terms of getting wins and losses. And the Jazz could have made the playoffs last year. At the very least, they could have made the play-in. And they said no to that. They shipped the veterans off, and they handed the reins to the young guys, and they got the lottery pick that they thought that was best for them. So they overachieved to a real degree, but they had to scale back a lot in order to be non-competitive enough.
Right.
To there were guys sitting left and right in March and in April, and it almost became a running joke because it was like, oh well, Jordan Clarkson's now sitting out. This has to do the trick. That didn't do the trick. Well, we're just not going to bring Collin Sexton back. That'll do the trick.
Right.
That didn't do the trick. Oh, well, okay. Let's sit Lauri Markkanen. That didn't do the trick. They were still competitive. And then it was Walker Kessler. Kris, they were playing Kris Dunn and Luka Samanic and real deep bench guys by the end of the season. I mean, Johnny Juzang was getting major minutes by the end of the season. So, they were, really, really competitive. Obviously, they got off to the 10-3 start. I remember, having a conversation with Mike Conley and he's saying, hey, if they really want to be bad, they're going to have to trade me. And, he said that in like October, and then they can get out and start 10-3. So, they did what was best for the long-term health of the organization. But it was definitely a fun year and an interesting year to cover.
Do you think they were even internally caught off guard by how good they were out of the gate? And then like, could they have been caught in the middle of, well, should we be like tearing this thing down a little bit sooner so that we can, be an actual Wemby sweepstakes or adjacent to it rather than competing for what is like, 10th or 9th or 8th, the 8th pick in the draft?
Even before the season, I don't think they thought they were going to be bad enough to be in truly be in the Wemby sweepstakes. They knew, and this bore out over the year, but they knew how good the coach was that they were hiring.
Okay.
And they were, Will Hardy basically blew away the interview process, blew the Jazz away. He was the pick, and the Jazz suspected that Hardy was going to make them competitive enough that they weren't truly going to be in the Wemby sweepstakes. Like they weren't going to be bottom 5 bad, bottom 3 bad. What it kind of ultimately took for San Antonio to get Wemby, and it just really bore out over time. They were competitive. Will was great in terms of being schematic, but he was even better than that in the locker room. Guys played really, really hard for him. He made a lot of right choices, and ultimately they were just too well coached a team to just be that bad. So, I thought that the Jazz had an inkling of that before the season even started.
It's not like a generational what if, but like if they had never made the trades, I'm just curious what would have happened with the coach of the year voting and Will Hardy. If you keep Mike Conley on this roster, if you keep that roster intact, I'm just curious. So he finished high enough already. What was he, third? Or can't remember. Like, would he have won if this team had stayed together? So that's just a random what if. But looking at this offseason that they just went through, did they kind of reinforce that they're still all about the bigger picture based off not even what they did, but kind of what they didn't do, where you didn't see them kind of aggressively chase like any conventional floor general or even go after like more wing type players?
Well, they chased Jrue Holiday, so I don't know that that's completely accurate. They wanted Jrue Holiday, and they were very interested in him, and interested enough to make a firm offer for him. The thing with the Jazz right now is that they think that they are in a position to rebuild on the fly. They don't believe that they have to go 19-63 over the next 5 seasons in order to rebuild. Mm-hmm. They think that they can incorporate their young players, and basically build around Lauri Markkanen and use the assets that they have to be a significant trade threat, all while winning basketball games. And if they make the playoffs or they make the play-in this year, or they're in contention for that this year, I don't expect to see them pull the plug on that. And I think that they see this as a rebuild where there's an avenue that they can be really competitive, and maybe even contention competitive very quickly. Not this year. I think this year, I think that they have a roster that has a ceiling of 6 and a floor of 11 or 12, and that's going to be, and it's going to be solely dependent on, I don't want to say solely dependent on, but it's going to be really dependent on how well their guard play is. But they don't believe that they're that far away. So I think that the Jazz are going to come out and try to be as competitive as possible. I think that they want to win at as high a level as possible, because I think that Lauri Markkanen's career, like he's going into season 8 and he's not been into the playoffs. I think that that's a significant goal for Lauri as an individual. So and they have more assets than anybody other than Oklahoma City, and I believe they intend to use it and try to make a significant splash pretty quickly.
So they wouldn't be a team that, let's just say if they're good enough, like they wouldn't be a team you don't think that would shy away from making a midseason move, or if they deem someone the right on the trade market goes out there where Oklahoma City's telegraphed, no, we're not doing that. Like that's just not going to happen. You think Utah's based? I mean, if they pursue Jrue Holiday, it seems like they're way more open to going that route.
No, they're not. There are two things. I believe that they're not afraid to be a buyer if that's the way the season goes. I don't think they're afraid to be a seller if that's the way the season goes. And I don't believe that they're afraid to make a consolidation move in the backcourt at some point in this season. So I do think that there are a couple of ways that this season can go that could dictate, the Jazz making a seismic shift in January or February. But I think a lot of it's going to depend on what the first 25 or first 30 games look like.
What do you make of the John Collins fit with this team and kind of what it does to the front court rotation and even just the wing rotation where, we saw Lauri play tons of three. We know he can do it, but like now you've basically decided you can get to minutes when Lauri's at the four, but like now Lauri is just a wing. And so I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on the Collins fit and its overarching impact on how the rosters sort of run.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think the Jazz looked at John Collins as a way to get, somebody who they think can be dynamic for, basically for free. They didn't have to give up anything.
Rudy Gay was the missing piece, and Atlanta just gave him away after they got him. I can't believe it.
I'm shocked.
Yeah.
But, he's going to be that missing piece for the Warriors, too.
That's the buzz. This is that time of year. That's the buzz coming out of training camp is that he's going to be the one that gets the roster.
I actually think he has a chance to make that roster.
I actually, if I had to pick right now, I'd be shocked if he didn't make the roster.
I think he is going to make the roster. But that being said, John's fit is going to be an interesting one, right? Because, here's a guy who at the apex of his career, and he's still only 26 years old, but at the apex of his career, he was a 2010 guy. He averaged 21 points, 10 rebounds a game in 2019. And then the production, significant fell to the point where it was a significant fall this year. I believe he averaged 13 points a game last year. So
shot like -% from three or whatever it was.
Did not shoot well from three. He was a square peg in a round hole in that offense towards the end of his tenure there. And, it was clear for a while that, he and that organization were headed for a divorce. So, he's a guy who I believe makes the Jazz front court very athletic. He's an above the rim guy. Lauri Markkanen's an above the rim guy. So he doesn't put the ball well on the floor. So he's going to have to, in some respects, be dependent on his guard play. So that's going to be really interesting. But, how well does he shoot the ball? Can he get back to 35%? Can he get back to 36% from three? If he doesn't, then you have to wonder about some of the spacing within the offense. Can he play a little bit of, small ball five? Can he exist in that realm? It's going to be really interesting to see how well he's incorporated in Will Hardy's offense, which emphasizes movement and, coming down off of pin down screens, doing a lot of stuff off the move that he frankly hasn't done in Atlanta in a very long time, if ever. So he's definitely in a new spot, and he's definitely in a different spot in his career on and off the floor.
Yeah, I'm still a big John Collins believer. I think a lot of the hand stuff still flew under the radar last year with his shooting, and you kind of alluded to this. Atlanta just continuously marginalized him on offense. They saw what he did best, and they kept moving him away from his strengths. It made no sense. I think the shooting's big just because this was a team that didn't set, and because of its guard play this year, there might not be too reliant on a ton of ball screens. And even if you are, unless he is going to play some five, like you said, he's not going to be like the primary screen setter. So you need that shooting, or at least the ability. He didn't really have to move off the ball a ton in Atlanta, as you already mentioned. So you need the ability to knock down those shots, or at least to get moving, because that's how he's going to generate his offense if he's playing next to Walker Kessler, would be my guess, right?
Right. So, I mean, it's going to, and Will's such a smart coach that they're going to find ways to get him involved in pick and roll. For instance, they were playing Portland last night, and he and Talen Horton-Tucker ran 2 or 3 side pick and rolls with, the configuration is, Talen and John on the side with, Lauri spacing on the wing, Walker Kessler actually spacing in the corner, and, Jordan Clarkson spacing, basically above the break at the top of the key. So you still had the space, but it was a little different the way they configured it, and they scored off of it. Talen actually made a really nice pocket pass, and they scored off of it. So it was definitely interesting to see some of the scheme.
That guy might be one of the most frustrating players I've ever watched, where it's like he always does like 2 or 3 things every night. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then there's like another 7 or 8 instances where I'm like, oh no. And so, but that related to that. So you mentioned Will Hardy a couple times already. What have we learned about how the Jazz are going to play stylistically at both ends? And I know they changed a little bit of stuff defensively in the middle of last season and like just the roster churn. But like, what can we expect with, are they going to look to, they really shot up their offensive pace last year after the trade deadline. Is that something we would expect to stick? Is there still going to be that commitment? I mean, there will be. Just where's their offensive rebounding rate going to be with Walker Kessler and John Collins on the floor at the same time? Just what did we learn stylistically about what Will Hardy wants to impart on this team at both ends?
Well, this is actually where I think the Jazz have a real significant strength. They're very big. Walker Kessler is 7 foot, maybe even 7'1". Lauri Markkanen is 7 foot. John Collins is 6'9". But they're unique in the fact that they are not big and slow. They're big and athletic. Lauri Markkanen's one of the more athletic guys in the league. So is John Collins, and I consider Walker Kessler one of the most athletic centers in the league in terms of how fast he runs the floor from end to end. So they played really fast last night against Portland. They got a lot of shots up. They got a lot of possessions. Mm-hmm. They got the ball inbounds fast. They pushed. Their sets were really crisp. They ran through their sets. They knew what they wanted to do. So they were really fast. And it'll be interesting to see if they continue to play that way, to continue to play fast, because if they can, and they don't actually kick the ball out of bounds every third or fourth possession, they're going to be more athletic than a lot of the teams that they face. And, they're a very collectively athletic team. And it seems really crazy to say that about the Utah Jazz, because for so long, basically for, 97% of their existence, they've been plotting. And, they had a 3%. They had a 3% existence where, Darren Williams was like the best point guard in the league, and they played fast because Darren was just like, listen, I'm not slowing down for anybody. Mm-hmm. But other than that, they haven't been a fast team that played really vertically. They've been a team that kind of out executed you. And this team is going to be fast, and it's going to be vertical. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the contrast to that is.
Speed can also help you offset maybe some of the concerns you have about the guard play, where it's, okay, well, we have guys who will be the lead ball handlers, but none of them are necessarily conventional table setters. And so what do you I had so many questions about the backcourt that I include in the outline for you, but what do you just make of this backcourt structure right now? I guess the one place to start that's weird, is it feels like Keyonte George is going to play like a major role, right? Like in his rookie season at some point. Would that be accurate?
Well, I believe he's going to be in the rotation from night one. And I believe that, at some point between now and opening night in 2024, he'll be the starting point guard. If he's not the starting point guard by opening night 2024, something went wrong. Like he's either hurt or he has not played anywhere near to what the Jazz think. And I believe that, the Jazz are putting him in the rotation with the expectation and the hope that he gets to the point where they can start him. I don't want to say sooner rather than later, but soon. They clearly think he's the point guard of the future, and they're going to give him minutes right now.
What is it like? Do you have any general impressions of his game, even based on what we've seen in summer league? Like, what is he bringing to this team out of the gate?
I think that right now he's the second best passer on the roster, behind Kelly Olynyk. I think that he's positively dynamic off the dribble. I think he's very athletic for a point guard. He's capable of playing above the rim. I think he's a 3-level scorer. But I think the reason why I do agree that he probably shouldn't start right now is that, he's got to learn two things. He's got to learn how to run an NBA team, and he's got to figure out the NBA from a defensive standpoint. I believe that if you start him at the point guard tomorrow, I believe that he can probably give you somewhere between 15 and 17 points and 5 to 7 assists a night, probably right off the bat. But you're going to lose a lot of games because of the stuff that he doesn't know. So, if the Jazz want to win games and they want to be competitive as possible, it makes sense to spoon feed him those minutes. Try to, get him in the right spots to where his strengths offensively are accentuated, but you're hiding his warts defensively and otherwise. And just until he's ready and until he really learns, the NBA game. To me, if I make an analogy, it's probably like you have a pitcher that goes through the batting order twice, and you see the batting order twice, right? And the batting order sees the pitcher twice. And then by the third time around in the batting order, what happens? You tee off on that pitcher because you've seen him twice now.
Right.
So I think, with Keyonte, have him go around the league once, have him go around the league twice, then maybe by February, late January or February, he's ready to take over the role.
Is there like a chance that he's just going to be their best off the dribble jump shooter out the gate when you kind of look at the rest of the personnel on this roster? Not most confident, because we know that'll be Jordan Clarkson.
There's a chance. There's a non-zero chance. Because he does things offensively that you can't teach. The way he can snake a pick and roll, take advantage of a big and drop, push him with an aggressive dribble and then pull up on a dime and make a three. You can't teach stuff like that. The way he can get downhill, stop on a dime, get him in range, you can't teach that. Get to the basket. He cuts without the ball, so he moves well without the ball. So he's a little unique there because a lot of ball in hand scorers who have his profile don't really move well without the ball. And Keyonte actually moves well without the ball. He's a much better passer than I thought he was a year ago at this time. And he's made better reads as the year has gone on. You can tell that his year at Baylor did his game a lot of good, in that he really took the coaching, Scott Drew's coaching there. because I've been watching Keyonte play, probably since he was about 15 or 16 years old,
Oh, geez.
and when he got to Baylor, he wasn't the passer that he is now. He's just a much better passer than he was at this time last year. So, he's a guy who's just really talented offensively, and he's also got the mental headspace that he's going to keep coming at you. He's a guy that can be 2 for 15 and still make 5 shots at the end of the game to beat you. So, for him, even with all of his natural talent and his natural ability, it's just about learning the parts of the game that you can teach, and learning some of that stuff and getting stronger and getting his body more NBA ready, or more NBA centric, because there's a big difference in his body and Scoot Henderson's body right now, which I kind of took note of last night. Take note. But the skill set is there, man. There are just things that he does right now that the rest of the roster doesn't do, and so it's just him learning, the game before you give him the keys.
How do you feel about how reliant they are on Jordan Clarkson to continue making, at least in the beginning of the season, incremental improvements as sort of like a leadish type playmaker? I thought he made strides last year. It wasn't pretty a lot of the time, but he was making an effort, it felt like, to defer when he's getting downhill in ways that he was not in previous years. What did you sort of make of that experience? And is it reasonable to expect that maybe he'll be more comfortable doing that stuff this season?
Well, to me, I mean, you look at a guy like Jordan Clarkson, and that's the effect of Will Hardy's coaching. Will ask him to be a player that he's never been at any point in his career, that he's never tried to be. And, he did it and he pulled it off. I mean, he was 20 points. I believe he was around 20 points a game, 5 assists a game, 4 rebounds a game, something like that. Maybe, but, averaging 4 or 5 assists a game. When's the last time we saw Jordan Clarkson do that?
Does he even average? I should have looked this up. Does he even average ever over 2 before that in his career?
The answer is never.
Okay.
But he continuously tried. Like, he didn't always do it. There were times, like other guards on the roster, that he kicked the ball into the 3rd row or threw it into the 4th row, or hit Danny Ainge in the head with a pass or something like that. But there were also times where he made wonderful reads and wonderful passes, and played unselfishly, all while keeping the balance of being the scorer that he is. So, the Jazz are going to ask him to do more of that and do that this year. I think it's one of the reasons why, they were comfortable with paying him and, extending him. But, he was a guy who I thought was a really pleasant surprise last year.
What did you make of the injuries? He's also shut down, but what did you make of the first year of the Collin Sexton experience in Utah?
He's a guy that I think that he's had, there are times where he's had real flashes, but I also think that there's times that he's really struggled. And this is a big year for him, right? Like, I think he's got to prove that he can play some point with some modicum of consistency and ability. And the Jazz started him the first 2 preseason games. They brought him off the bench against Portland. They play against the New Zealand Breakers on Monday night, and I believe that that'll be the last preseason game that the regular rotation either plays in or plays a major role in. Mm-hmm. So he's got a lot to prove from a playmaking standpoint. I think that he's Utah's best player on the roster in terms of in transition, getting out in transition and in bending a defense in transition. He's somebody who's very difficult to guard in space. He's very difficult to guard one-on-one with his athleticism and his quickness. But he is, he struggles sometimes and sometimes significantly so with the art of playmaking for others and, just the ability to run a team. So, he's going to have to figure that part out.
Yeah, and I think you put it kindly when you're talking about his struggles as playmaking for others. Like, he can get tunnel vision, and I think it's really difficult for him when defenses are more keyed in on him, because if they're not worried about other creation threats, depending on who's on the floor, that just makes it a lot tougher for him. But he's someone I've always thought can be more complimentary than people gave him credit for. I don't know if Utah's set up to use him in a complimentary capacity just because they need him. Like a lot of the stuff that he can do on ball, like you mentioned, his speed, but just like as an off-ball shooter, I think that's someone who can fit into a larger context of a team in ways that people just weren't really giving him credit for in Cleveland. And I know that his tenure there ended with injuries and whatnot and the emergence of Darius Garland, but I thought he got a little bit of a bad rap. I'm hoping he stays healthy just to get a better feel for what he is with this team. How do you think what is who else is going to crop up in this backcourt? Like, are they going to lean a lot on Talen Horton-Tucker? Kris Dunn played really well to close the season, or one of them more important than the other? It seems like they would lean THT just because he can play maybe more wing minutes, but like Kris Dunn can defend everybody basically. So what do you sort of make of that situation?
Well, the funny thing with so if you want to talk about Talen, I mean, all the Jazz Twitter is going to take a side here because I believe he's by far the most polarizing player on the team among the Jazz fan base. And he's really interesting because I think that there's a real chance that he's the opening night starter at point guard.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just coming in hot, man.
I would not. I mean, I don't think I would do it, but I want to see it. So I'm all for them doing it.
So the thing that I think is really leaning the Jazz or making him a real candidate for this is right now, okay, Keyonte's not ready to start. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But if Keyonte's not ready to start, everybody else has a significant wart, right?
Yeah.
Like Collin is small and he doesn't, that he's got a long learning curve in terms of being a point guard. Okay. Jordan Clarkson, you don't want the ball in his hands to start every single possession. Like, you just don't. Like, the possession might not start. Right. So, and I love Jordan, and, I think that he's the best perimeter scorer on the team, but you want him coming off screens. You want him doing Jordan Clarkson stuff, even if he's in the starting lineup. Kris Dunn, you worry about the spacing, even though he's by far the best defender out of any of the candidates. And he's figured out how to score in the NBA. He's figured out how to play offense in the NBA. And then you get to Talen, right? So he's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. But if you put him at the point guard spot, and I don't think a lot of people are realizing this, if you put him at the point guard spot, he's probably got a physical advantage over 95% of every starting point guard in the NBA. He's 6'4". He's got a 7'1" wingspan. He's 235 pounds, putting it mildly, and he's very athletic for being 235 pounds. He plays above the rim. He can finish. He's probably bending a defense off the dribble better than any of the candidates this year in training camp and in preseason games. The problem with Talen is he might kick the ball into the third row every 3 possessions. And he also
his live dribble passing leaves
a lot to be desired.
Much to be desired.
And he also might shoot 28% from 3-point range. And that's not going to stop him from shooting. Like, he's not going to, like, if you look at Talen and you say, Talen, like, look, you're 2 for 10 from from 3. Just get to the bucket. He might still go out there and take a contested 3. Like, he might do all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But he also might get you a triple-double. And he also might just be, really hard to deal with off the dribble and getting into the paint. He's going to touch the paint off the dribble at any point in time. He's going to get to the basket. He's going to do that in transition. He's going to do it in the half court. The question is, what does he do when he gets to the basket? So if you're the Jazz, there are a couple of things at play. You have a front court right now that's not very ball in hand. In fact, you have a front court right now that's pretty much not ball in hand at all. Lauri is such a good basketball player, and he's at a point where, it doesn't matter who's around him. He's going to produce, and he's going to get 25 and 12. But John Collins isn't ball in hand. Obviously, Walker Kessler is not ball in hand. So you need a ball in hand backcourt. So it kind of makes sense to start Talen and Jordan Clarkson because those guys can wreak havoc off the dribble. And, and your best player, whether they're wreaking havoc off the dribble and passing the ball or not, your best player is still going to go and get 25 and 10 for you. So what you need is, so you tell Talen, listen, just start the possession, just get the ball moving. And obviously, if he gets the ball back in that possession, he's probably going to call for a screen. He's going to go screen and roll, and he's going to dance and boogie and do his thing. But you're going to do it from having a standpoint of having a 6'4", 230-pound point guard as a 5'11", 200-pound point guard, or Keyonte, who's not really ready on night one to do what you need to do. That's conducive to winning. So if this happens and Talen's the starting point guard, it's definitely, it'll be a roller coaster. And I still don't think that this is settled. It could still be Collin. It could still be Kris Dunn. But I think that if it is Talen, that's kind of what the thinking is.
You mentioned Lauri, and sort of, it's a nice segue when you're talking about the guard pecking order and some of their limitations. Lauri is, you said, he's not a cell creator. It's like 65+% of his twos were assisted last year. Over 90% of his threes were assisted. Do you expect them to try and lean on him for more self-creation? And do you believe, watching him a lot last year, that he has that extra gear as not just a self-creator, but maybe is also a passer?
Well, I think at 7 foot and with his athleticism and with his skill set in terms of shooting over the top, I think you could do a lot of, God, I don't really want to make this comparison.
Oh boy, make it.
I think you could do a lot with Lauri, what Dallas did with Prime Dirk. See, I told you.
Aggregator, Mavs fans.
I told you.
Tony Jones and Lauri Markkanen is better than Dirk Nowitzki.
Now we're gonna see it, right?
Yeah.
No, but like the vision, peep the vision, right? Like you put him 15 to 17 feet from the basket. You isolate him at the top of the top of the foul line, right? He's being guarded by threes, so he's most likely going to be taller than them, or he's being guarded by fours, to which he's most likely going to be quicker than them. And if you need a basket in the last 5 minutes, go give me a bucket off of that. Go take one dribble and pull up. So I think some of that, you could do that, some of that in isolation. but you're only doing it in the last 5 minutes of games.
Okay.
But the beauty of Lauri is that it just kind of doesn't matter what you're doing. He's going to make a cut, or, he's 7 foot, he's going to catch the ball on the wing and he's going to raise up and shoot. He's got an easy, quick shooting motion that's really low stress, and he makes 40% of them. Or he's, going to get it in transition. He's going to score that way, or he's going to get an offensive rebound and he's going to score that way, or he's going to get fouled. And, I watched him against the Clippers last Tuesday. The Jazz were kicking the ball into the upper deck, and it didn't matter. He's still at 13-6 at halftime, and the offense looked horrendous. And on Saturday, when the offense looked great, he had like 17 and 10 in like 12 minutes. Like, he's just really, really, really good. Mm. And, I think that he's primed for a really big year. But his next evolution is, can we give you the ball in the last 5 minutes and can you go score baskets for us? When the defense is loaded up, you got a primary defender, you got one guy sloughing off on your right, another guy sloughing off on your left. Can you make that diagonal pass to the corner that leads to an open three? Or can you go and make a game winner for us? Things like that. We've gotten down to that part with Lauri Markkanen. We know what's going to happen in the first 43 minutes of a game. He's going to get you, 22 to 27 points a night, and he's going to get you 10 rebounds, and he's going to do it. Most likely he's going to do it efficiently. But what's going to happen in the last 5 minutes? So that's, to me, what the evolution of Lauri Markkanen has to be this year.
I do feel like, just based off his shooting stroke and his size, that if there's real volume to it, which there's never really been for his game, in his defense, that he should be a better pull-up jump shooter than we've seen at any point in his career. So I'm very interested to see that. I think you mentioned about finding guys in the corners. I think that's why John Collins' shooting is so important, because if you get to lineups where Walker Kessler's off the floor and you're playing Collins and Olynyk, maybe Taylor Hendricks is involved, whatever, like, the floor is so open. I really do believe that the defensive attention he's drawing, and then just some of the flashes he's shown, I actually think, and I don't know if this is a popular, unpopular hot take, like, I think that's someone who can be an above average passer for his position when it comes to just finding guys. And so if John Collins is hitting threes and, like, you have him and Olynyk on the court at the same time, or, like I said, Hendricks, whatever, they're going to help off those guys, because Lauri is drawing that type of attention when you give him space. So I think he's going to be fine. I've wondered if there would be pullback on his efficiency, whether he might struggle this year just because of the not having a Conley there, not even having a Malik Beasley 3-point volume outlet. But just the more I watch him, I think that it's there. And so it might just come down to, like, if there are guys around him hitting enough of those shots where they can space the floor, yeah, you're not going to slow things down all the time for him, and you're not going to want him to run things from a standstill that much. But I think he has that in him. And so I'm hopeful, but I'm just so curious to see how often he gets to do it, and then just what it looks like once he does.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you want to see the strides of his game that, have not typically been there in the last 8 years. And so, you want to see him evolve off the dribble a little bit more. You want to see him evolve in the passing game a little bit more. I think the downside for Lauri is that he's not sneaking up on anybody this year. Everybody knows he's good now. So he's going to when he plays the Los Angeles Clippers, he's going to see Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. When he plays against Minnesota, he's going to see Jaden McDaniels. When he plays against New Orleans, he's going to see Herb Jones. He's going to see all those. He's going to see the best of the best now. So, he's just got to figure it out in some of the ways that he hasn't in the past. But, the baseline that he has to work on is so vast. Like, he's such a great shooter. He doesn't miss free throws. He can score without needing to dominate the basketball. He's going to have a physical advantage, on many, many nights. He's going to have an athleticism advantage on many nights. The baseline there is so vast that, it's going to be hard to see him not having a great season. But, what the question is, can he evolve from an all-star level player to an all-NBA level player? Can he be, right now his profile looks like the second best player on a championship team. At age 26, can he up his profile to where you're looking at him and saying he can be the best player on a championship team? So that's where his challenges are going to come from this year.
Walker Kessler, an amazing rookie season. One of the rookies that I missed on. Just so impactful defensively. Do you see the way that he played last year? Does it maybe change? How, could the Jazz feasibly, when you look at the personnel they have, you've mentioned athleticism, you've mentioned size, and they're still kind of going to be at a defensive deficit every night at every other position other than Walker Kessler's.
Right.
How do you think that changes at all? Will they look to be more aggressive in front of him this year, try to look to force more turnovers to kind of offset that deficit? And then knowing, okay, we have one of the best rim protectors in the league behind us and he's pretty mobile. So that is something that they could try, or just any, will he change the way this team defends this year in any way?
I think because of him, I think that if you're Will Hardy, you can't be afraid to do a lot of things and try a lot of things, play a lot of drop and then switch and then play some zone and, do a lot of the things that, you can do when you have a roving rim protector like Walker. So, he causes a lot of trouble for teams because of how good he is around the rim on both ends. And how hard he plays and how hard he runs the floor. You really got to bust back against Walker Kessler, because if not, he's going to outrun your big, and he's either going to get a layup or he's going to make somebody else commit to him, which is going to lead to other opportunities in delayed transition. So, he's got a, the thing with Walker is, the Jazz are going to let him shoot threes this year. So
okay.
let's see how many he makes. I'm not expecting him to be Brook Lopez, but he's going to shoot. He's going to take some shots this year. So let's see how many he makes. Let's see what happens when teams start switching and they put smalls on him. Can he take advantage of those matchups? I believe he can. And let's see what happens when teams put shooting bigs on the floor to try to draw him out of the paint. Can he defend well enough away from the paint to make teams pay for that as well? So those are some of the questions with him.
The thing I think that was most surprising, I mean, I missed on so much about him. I just didn't see it when I was watching him before he entered the NBA. Was sort of the step-for-step defense, not necessarily the switching, but if he's angled and all, just his ability to keep pace with these quicker ball handlers, which lead me to believe that, if teams want to throw shooting bigs and he's on them, I just feel like he can cover so much ground in such a coordinated way. It doesn't really bother me. All the questions on offense that you mentioned for sure, I want to see, and if he's going to shoot threes, I absolutely want to see that. He did, to his credit, I was looking before we recorded, he shot 63% or whatever on non-dunks and non-alley-oop twos. So this is someone who has a little bit more offensive skill than he's probably shown. And so I will be interested to see how can it broaden, can even improve his quick passing. If the Jazz are going to have so much, body movement around him. Ochai Agbaji, what did you make of him as a rookie, and what are you watching most closely for in year two?
I think he's going to be in the league for 10 to 12 years. He's got the prototype of being a real 3-and-D guy. The thing, I think the Jazz have to be careful with him because they have so many mouths to feed in the backcourt that, you don't want to see him get lost in the shuffle, either in terms of minutes or, just getting on the floor, getting them involved in the offense. He's almost 100% reliant on others making plays for him, or the ball finding him for open threes, or the ball finding him for transition layups and dunks. But, there's just going to be plenty of nights where the Jazz are going to need him to guard the other team's best perimeter player, because there's nobody else, especially if Kris Dunn is not on the floor.
Yeah.
So, he's a really good point of attack defender. I believe that he's developing into a really good shot blocker, especially trailing the fast break. And, if he can put that together, and then he can shoot 35 to 40% from threes, I mean, he's the guy that, to me, every championship roster needs. He's the Bruce Bowen, or he's the Danny Green, or he's the Bruce Brown, or the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, those 6'4" to 6'6", long and athletic 3-and-D guys that, make a real impact on a championship roster in 25 to 30 minutes a night on both ends of the floor. So I think that if you're the Jazz, you definitely want him around long term. I believe that there's a world where, 3 years down the road, Keyonte George develops into a 20 to 25 point per game scorer, and then Ochai Agbaji is the perfect two guard next to him, because he gives you athleticism, he gives you length, he gives you size, he gives you defense, and he gives you shooting and the ability to get out in transition. But, this is, an example of how many mouths to feed that are in that Jazz backcourt. Against Portland, they put a lineup out there that was Collin Sexton. It was Collin Sexton, Kris Dunn, Keyonte George, Ochai Agbaji was playing the 4, and Walker Kessler was playing the 5. There's so many guys that deserve to play that Will Hardy just was like, screw it. Let's make a lineup of the guys that deserve to play.
You're going to give me this many guards, I'm going to play this many guards.
Just play them. And they just ran up and down the floor for like 10 minutes. It was actually hilarious, because it was like, oh my God, you just had 3 7-footers on the floor, and now you got to chase 3 6'3" guys around. But it's just an example of how many guys that the Jazz have to figure out roles for.
I do hope we get to see a lot of him with Keyonte George, just because I think George is probably their best point of attack passer right now, and Ochai is so good at just moving away from the ball and all different directions and finding seams. And I think that's the best. I don't know what to make of him defensively yet, but I'm excited to see if he's going to go up against that caliber of assignments. Before we enter the cookie cutter portion of the podcast, any feel for, I'm assuming Brice Sensabaugh just won't really play much, given the state of the backcourt right now this year, but I'm in love with Taylor Hendricks, and yet the front court is pretty crowded. Are either of these guys going to get, if the Jazz forget about the end of the season, if they decide to pull back or whatever, but is there any chance of them playing meaningful minutes in meaningful games?
Brice Sensabaugh is yet to see a minute in the preseason.
I was reading that, and I thought he was injured or something.
He's not injured. He is fully healthy, and he just hasn't seen any time. I'm hoping to see him on Monday against New Zealand. Just get him a couple of minutes of run, put him on the floor. Let's see what it looks like, for better or for worse. Taylor Hendricks, man, it's funny because I just hope Jazz fans have patience with him, because he's not ready right now, but he has the ability to develop into an absolute star level role player. Star level to the point where, even though he's a role player, he might see a few all-star games. He can guard 3s, 4s, 5s, and I believe he can even guard 2s. he can shoot the ball. He's long and athletic, and he's a guy that I think that, you just look for, like those uniform 6'10", those unicorn 6'10" guys that can guard absolutely everybody, and that's what I think that he can develop into. But he's not ready right now. He's not going to be ready on opening night. He's not going to be ready in January. He might not be ready in March. And, he's going to spend possibly a lot of time in the G League. And, I think that Jazz fans are going to have to reconcile themselves with that just because he was the 9th pick, and just be patient, because by year 2, year 3, year 4, he's got a chance to be really, really good and be really, really impactful on both ends of the floor.
I am so high on him. I think that there are going to be teams, Orlando, Indiana. Why did we take Jarris Walker? Why did we take Anthony Black? I'm so high. The ground he could cover, it's like he teleports. I believe in the shot. I don't think he needs like all these ball skills to be, as you said, an impactful player. I will not be patient. I demand to see Taylor Hendricks minutes right out of the gate, because I think he's going to be an exceptional NBA player.
Listen, I think he can be Jaren Jackson Jr. Like,
you don't got to sell. You know what? I think he's going to be better than Jaren Jackson Jr.
By the time he's how old is Jaren now? Is he 25?
He's on a second contract. Let's see. Jaren Jackson Jr. is 24. Jeez.
Okay.
He just turned 24.
Wow. So Taylor is 19. 5 years from now, like 5-6 years from now, I believe that Taylor can be Jaren Jackson Jr. He can, he's not as big, not quite as big, but I believe he can be that defensive player of the year level guy who can wreak havoc inside and shoot 40% from 3.
I'm sold. You talked me into it. All right, we're in the quick hitter, cookie cutter portion of the podcast. Are there any strengths or weaknesses flying under the radar about this team, or just stuff that we haven't talked about that you think needs to be hit very quickly?
Well, the point guard spot, I mean, to me, that's going to make or break Utah season in terms of what they're going to be. If, I believe that they have the kind of regular season roster that can win a lot of games, but they don't have a playoff roster. And the Jazz know they don't have a playoff roster. Like, there's a world where they get a 6, 7, 8 seed and they just get demolished in the playoffs because they don't have a playoff level roster. And, we all know that we both know that there's just so much difference between, a regular season team and a playoff team.
Yeah.
And the Jazz have a regular season team. They have a bunch of young whippersnappers that are going to get up and down the floor every night, that are going to win a bunch of games in January because nobody's going to want to play in January. And
they're the antithesis of the Heat, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. They're the antithesis of the Heat. So, it'll be interesting to see how this roster develops this year, and, what, if any, changes are made to this roster as the year goes on.
I know there will probably be a lot of shape shifting when you're looking at the rotation, but when we're trying to figure out like who are the 10 guys that are going to play the most this season, it does feel like there's a healthy amount of locks. Jordan Clarkson, Agbaji, Markkanen, Collins, Kessler, Sexton, THT. And then I think you would have Keyonte George penciled in as a lock, which brings us to 8. And then Kelly Olynyk, is he a lock? Like, that would be 9.
Oh, he's a lock. Yeah.
So then who do you think gets that? Like, when we're looking, okay, these 10 players played the most minutes for the Jazz this year. Who's that 10th guy? Please say Taylor Hendricks.
I'm going to say Kris Dunn.
I get it. I'm not happy about it. But
I'm going to say Kris Dunn.
Fair enough. So this is to some extent matchup dependent, but if we're fast forwarding to the end of the season, what will have been the Jazz's most relied upon crunch time unit?
It's going to be Jordan Clarkson. Oh, that's a good one.
Lauri's in there, right?
Let's guess. It's going to be Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, Oh,
I was gonna have Walker Kessler penciled in as like he'll be
yeah,
in
but
there.
it could also be Kelly Olynyk.
Okay.
So, like, it could either be Kelly or John. It could either be Agbaji or Walker. I think it's going to fluctuate from night to night, and some, especially early in the season. But Lauri is your biggest lock. I believe Jordan is your second biggest lock because you just got to have his scoring on the floor. And I believe that Walker Kessler is probably your third biggest lock. I believe that Kelly Olynyk is one of your biggest locks because he's far and away the best passer on the roster. And he can also shoot. And he also plays really well with Lauri. But, like, what if you're playing a roster of point guard, whoever the point guard is, Jordan Clarkson, Ochai Agbaji, Kelly Olynyk, Lauri Markkanen, something like that. Or it could be Walker Kessler, something like that.
I was going to say, I think Ochai ends up being a lock, like if he's not immediately, just because of the skill set that he brings. And if we're talking about Kris Dunn, there's just too much offensive trade-off when you're looking at we need to cater to defense. And then THT's decision-making is just destructive at points. So, so this team, as we record this on October 15th, their over-under is set at 35.5. It actually went up a win in the past couple of days. Would you take the over or the under on that?
I'm going to go ahead and take the over. And I'll take the over because I just think that Will Hardy's too good.
I took the under when we did over-under just because there's so few wins to go around. And that leads me into the question of, like, what teams in the West right now would you sit here and say for the regular season, the Utah Jazz will definitely be better than them? I came up with 3, and I have the Rockets, the Spurs, and the Blazers, and 2 of those teams aren't trying to win. I'm just not high on the Rockets, and then I struggled to envision, okay, well, who are they beating out after that?
I'm going to abstain a little bit and not say who I think they're better than or not better than. But I will say that, it's my belief that you just play your 82 and you figure it out from there, because you're not playing against, the San Antonio Spurs or the Portland Trail Blazers. You're, in so many ways, you're just playing against your schedule. Like, what does the first 20 games look like? What do the dog days look like when you get into January and you get into the first 2 weeks of February? What does your post-trade deadline look like? So this is what I mean, right? Like, the Jazz are 10-3 to start the season because they had a veteran roster led by, one of the best point guards of this generation. So game 14, the guy who's one of the best point guards of this generation gets hurt, sprains an ankle, which is what Mike Conley does at some point almost every year. Like, he gets hurt a lot. So he misses, I don't know how many games he missed. He missed 12 games, and the Jazz couldn't get into an offense without him. So they come back to earth. And then Conley gets back, and they right the ship, and they steady themselves, and they're very competitive again. And then the Jazz pull the plug because they're like, oh, you know what? We're winning way too much right now.
Got to throw Omer Severn out there, yeah.
So what does the 82 game schedule look like for the Jazz? Do they stay healthy? If they do stay healthy, do they play as hard every night this year as they did last year? I just believe that outside of, the first 4 or 5 teams right now, pretty much outside of Denver, LA, and Phoenix, like, I think those 3 are the best 3 rosters.
Wow, a Clippers fan.
You're a Clippers fan?
No, you said LA. You're really in on the Clippers, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm so in on the Clippers. But I believe that the Lakers, the Nuggets, and the Suns are, significant. I don't want to say, yeah, probably significantly better than the rest of the West in terms of construction.
I would agree with you for Denver and Phoenix. I don't have the same level of faith in the Lakers. LeBron and the foot stuff last year, and like you need Anthony Davis to again be your best player, and then for him to play in enough games for that to matter. I like what they did this offseason. I like their team.
I actually happen to think pretty much the other way. I don't think this roster is actually dependent on Anthony Davis and LeBron in the regular season. Now they're dependent on them in the playoffs. If they're not in their best in the playoffs, they're not going to win in the playoffs. But
you're that high on Cam Reddish?
I'm that high on that roster. Like I think that roster's got uncommon depth and versatility.
It's got depth. Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's a fair point.
And, I think that they can go a string of 5 or 6 games and D'Angelo Russell's winning them 3 or 4 of them if, your first 2 are not playing. So, but be it as it may, I mean, besides like the first 3 or 4 or 5, everything else is variables, right? Like, Denver's matchup proof. As long as Jokic and Murray are playing, they're going to be at the top of the conference. As long as Booker and Durant are playing, they're going to be at the top of the conference. But everybody else, I mean, it's like, how do you defend night to night? How do you shoot night to night? How healthy do you stay night to night? And it all affects their variance. Like, I think that there's a world where if Minnesota stays healthy, they're the 4th best team in the West.
You're right. Me and you, same wavelength. You don't got to tell me I'm still in on the Wolves.
Yeah, I'm in on the Wolves this year. Like, especially with an entire year of Mike Conley actually organizing that roster. And, I think Anthony Edwards is amazing. So, I definitely think so with the Jazz, like, I just don't look at it as who are they better than. I look at it as what does the 82 game schedule do to them, do for them, and how they handle it. And if they handle it well, you look up and you're 42-40 and you're 43-39 and you're the 8th seed and you're in the play-in. If Lauri Markkanen misses 25 games, or they don't play as hard night to night as they did last year, or if John Collins shoots 24% from 3, or any number of variables, if they kick the ball into the stands every third possession, then they're 33-49 and they're looking at a lottery pick.
Is there, before I get you out of here, anything or anyone we didn't talk about that you think needs to be covered?
Man, I was looking at I think we're good.
You don't have any like really spicy like Jarrell Brantley takes?
No Jarrell Brantley takes. Let's see.
There were people who were all aflutter about, not Jazz specifically, but there was some social media stuff about like how much Yurt can help a team in the NBA, and specifically being a Jazz. Any strong opinions on Yurt?
Depends on how well he shoots it and how well he rebounds the ball. I do think that there's going to be a world where he gets chances. I think that everybody's going to get a chance at some point in this. I think that everybody's going to get a chance at some point in the season. So it's just going to be a matter of, what he does with his chances when it gets there. But he can really shoot it, and I'm confident of that. And I think he can really rebound it. So how does he defend in space? And this the other thing, like who gets hurt? And what opportunities open up there?
Tony, this was great. Are you able just to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the terrific work that you do? You
can find me on T Jones on the NBA on Twitter. I'm never calling it X.
No, we don't. That's why, hey, the logo on the screen, if you see, it's Twitter still.
Yep. So you can definitely find me there. You can find me on Instagram as well. And if you're, if you're really old school, you can find me on Facebook. So, I try to I told my daughter that my 19-year-old, I said, I gave you a birthday shout out on Facebook. Did you see it? And she was like, no.
She's like, what is Facebook?
Like, she was like, I'm never going to be on Facebook, Dad. So definitely, find me on any one of those platforms, and I'll try to do the best work that I can.
You do great work. The link to his Twitter and his Athletic profile page will be in the podcast and YouTube description. So go subscribe to The Athletic so you can read Tony's work.
Subscribe to The Athletic. Please keep me employed.
Yeah, keep Tony employed so that he'll agree to keep coming back on this podcast. Yes. And also, because Tony lets me send him memes in DMs or spam his mentions during the season. My favorite thing to ask about what fans do in your mentions, they'll say that I'll see the strangest shit that you quote tweet. So I'll just respond and be like, well, what does this mean for the chances of the Jazz acquiring Zion Williamson at the deadline? Yeah. Tony rolls with it. I always appreciate someone who's willing to be not so serious in those instances. So go subscribe to The Athletic. Thank you so much for doing this, Tony. And I'm sure, as you know by now, I'll be pestering you again in the future.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun.